I always thought that no matter what, my father would be there for me on the most important day of my life. That no matter how much he favored my sister, no matter how many times I had been overlooked, at least on this one day, my wedding day, I would finally be his priority. I was wrong. 5 days before the wedding, I called my father. It was supposed to be just a formality. I had always assumed he would be the one to walk me down the aisle, but when I heard his voice, something felt off. "I need some time to think about it," he said. My heart dropped. Think about it? What was there to think about? The next day, he called me back. My fingers trembled as I picked up the phone, still clinging to hope. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart, but I can't walk you down the aisle. Katie needs me. She wants to scatter her cat's ashes in Hawaii, and she asked me to be there with her." I almost dropped the phone. A cat's ashes. I pressed the phone to my ear, trying to make sense of what I had just heard. My father, my only living parent, had chosen to fly across the country for a dead cat instead of standing beside his daughter on her wedding day. "Dad, you're choosing Katie over me." "Again," I whispered, my throat tightening. "It's not like that, honey. Katie has been going through so much. She needs me more than you do right now. You have Andy. You'll be surrounded by love, but Katie, she only has me." I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted the salt on my lips. I hung up the phone without another word. That night, as I sat alone in my room staring at my wedding dress hanging by the window, something inside me snapped. I had spent my entire life trying to earn my father's love, waiting for the day he would finally put me first. That day wasn't coming. If he thought I was going to cry and beg for his attention, he was wrong. I was done being second place. I was going to walk down that aisle alone, and if he regretted his choice later, that was his burden to bear, not mine. I wasn't surprised that my father chose Katie over me. He had been doing it my entire life. Ever since my mother passed away when I was 16, my father had one priority: Katie. And I was just there. It wasn't always this way. My mother had treated us both fairly. She made sure that no matter how different we were, we both felt equally loved. But after she was gone, the balance tipped. Katie had always been fragile. Sickly as a child, she had a way of making herself seem weaker than she really was. If there were chores to do, she was too tired. If something went wrong, it was never her fault. And my father? He believed her every time. "Just help your sister out, sweetheart. She's been through so much." But hadn't I been through it too? I lost my mother the same day she did. I grieved the same way she did. Yet, somehow, I was expected to be the strong one. So I cleaned the house. I cooked the meals. I did my homework alone, while Katie was coddled for failing hers. If she wanted something, I had to give it to her. If she was in a bad mood, I had to tiptoe around her. And the worst part? My father saw nothing wrong with it. It wasn't just favoritism. It was as if I was a second-class citizen in my own home. The day I left for college, I felt something I hadn't in years: relief. For the first time, I could breathe. I didn't have to be Katie's servant. I didn't have to listen to my father, make excuses for her. I could just exist. I kept in touch with my dad because despite everything, I still loved him. But Katie, I avoided her like the plague. I didn't miss the passive-aggressive comments, the constant complaints, the way she turned everything into a competition she always had to win. For years, I built a life for myself, one where I wasn't living in Katie's shadow. And then I got engaged. Andy and I met in college, and after nearly 8 years together, we finally decided to get married. We had worked hard to build a stable life. We had good jobs, a nice home, and most importantly, we were happy. Katie, on the other hand, not so much. After failing at multiple jobs, she had jumped into a jewelry business with a friend. No research, no experience, just blind faith that it would work. Of course it didn't. Within a year, all their money was gone. Katie had to move back, in with my dad, unemployed and bitter. And then, just weeks before my wedding, her cat died. Now don't get me wrong, I understand grief. That cat had been with her for almost 15 years. But Katie took it to another level. She locked herself in her room, refused to eat, and posted dramatic messages online about how life was so cruel. And my father? He babied her. She just needs time, he said, every time I told him she needed to get back on her feet. So, while I was planning my wedding, my father was nursing a fully grown woman through a meltdown over a cat. I should have known then that things were only going to get worse. The moment my father told me he was skipping my wedding, I felt something inside me break. You could go with her another day, Dad. Or maybe a friend could go with her instead, I pleaded, my voice shaking. Sweetheart, she specifically asked for. Me. She needs me there for support. It's the first time she's wanted to do anything in weeks. I can't say no. But you can say no to me? Silence. That silence told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't my father's priority. I never had been. I hung up the phone, and for 2 days I cried. I grieved. Not just for my father's absence at my wedding, but for the painful truth I had spent years ignoring. I had always hoped that one day he would see me, that he would finally treat me as his daughter, not just the other child. But that day wasn't coming, and if he didn't care about me, then why should I care about him? That's when the idea hit me. If my father didn't want to walk me down the aisle, I would find someone who would. I called my uncle, my father's twin brother. My uncle and my father hated each other. They had been rivals since childhood. Any time they were in the same room, they tried to outdo each other. The tension between them was legendary. So when I asked my uncle to walk me down the aisle, he was stunned. Are you sure about this? We're not exactly close. I know, I said, but it would really piss him off. Pause. Then laughter. Oh, I'm in. I made a post online thanking my uncle for stepping up when my father wouldn't. I knew it would get back to my dad. That was the point, and sure enough, within hours, he called me. How could you do this? He demanded. Of all people, you chose him. You made your choice, Dad, I said coldly, and I made mine. I'll talk to Katie. I'll convince her to change the date. Just let me walk you down the aisle. I laughed. Actually laughed. Now you care? Now that you're embarrassed? He hesitated. It would be humiliating for me if my twin walked you down instead of me. People will think I abandoned you. You did abandon me. Silence. You're being petty and immature, he finally said. Yes, I am. Just like you. For the first time in my life, I saw my father for who he really was. Not a struggling single dad, not an exhausted man trying his best, just someone who had never truly cared about me the way he cared about Katie. The next day, I called my uncle and told him I had changed my mind. I didn't need anyone to walk me down the aisle. I was going to do it alone. My wedding was beautiful. I married the man I love, surrounded by people who truly cared about me. And my father? He didn't show up. He was in Hawaii with Katie, scattering her cat's ashes. Days later, Katie messaged me, furious that I had told our relatives the truth about why they weren't there. I can't believe you made us look bad, she whined. You did that to yourselves, I replied. I blocked my father. I didn't cry this time. For years I had tried to be the perfect daughter, hoping one day he would love me the way he loved Katie. But I'm done waiting. I don't need a father who chooses a dead cat over his own daughter. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like second place anymore. I feel free. Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. Your time and engagement mean the world to me. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. for more real-life stories that will leave you speechless. See you in the next one.